Hi, I'm Rob Hartnett. On the Art of the Possible podcast, we aim to inspire, entertain, and educate you in all areas of leadership and leading a life full of possibility. We speak with people who inspire by their actions and their attitudes and cover a wide range of personal and business topics that are relevant for today. The Art of the Possible podcast is brought to you by our sponsors, the John Maxwell team, Extended Disc Behavioural Assessments, and Selling Strategies International. You can find out about all these brands and more at robhartnett.com. And now, let's get on to the episode. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the latest episode of the Art of the Possible podcast. I am super excited today. We've got a special guest. Mr. Chris Goede is here. Chris is the Executive Vice President of Corporate Leadership Solutions at the John Maxwell Company. Chris Goede, how are you, my friend?
Rob, I am excited to be with you today. And you sound like you come from the school of John and myself. You have that incredible radio voice. I love it.
I'm going to put it all down to my beautiful Rode microphones, all from Australia. It makes me sound great.
That's right.
Thank you so much. And Chris is excited to talk to you because, as I said, I listened to the podcast that you and Perry Holly do on a regular basis, and have listened to you so many times in the car and when I used to do public transport because we're in stage 4 COVID lockdown in Australia. So much. So it's been so exciting to actually have you on my podcast as well. So I've been hearing you and Perry's dulcet tones, and I actually connected up with Perry. We had a call a couple of weeks ago as well, so that was fantastic, and discussed our days of IBM training and all the early days of the IT industry and the halcyon days of those early days of Microsoft and Apple battles. So that was he's a great guy, isn't he, Perry?
Great guy. And when you talk about the IBM days, when we talk about leadership, we were talking today. We were in the office together, and we're convinced that someone could just give us a topic, almost kind of like John does the Minute with Maxwell, if you've ever seen it, where somebody just walks up to John and John doesn't prepare at all for it, and they just give him a word and he kind of just riffs on it. Well, Perry and I were talking today, and he was like, with my years at IBM and all the things I went through, and I'm not going to tell you all those things. And he said, your years with John, because I've been with John on and off about 20 years. He said, maybe we ought to start just riffing on words and stop preparing. And so he's such a great guy, and we connect so well, and we value people, and that's kind of at the core of our DNA. And when you have that, then you're in alignment with a lot of leadership thoughts and your philosophy, and then your behaviors of it. And so, so he and I, natural. I'll tell you a quick funny story about that. So when we started our podcast, I was on there, and I was doing it by myself. And it was kind of first experience. This was years ago, and it just felt horrible. I was like this is not working well. So I sent it to Perry because he was coaching me at the time. I had hired him to be an executive coach, and we've become friends. And I said, hey, give me some critical feedback here. And he gave me some good feedback. But then at the bottom, he said, hey, you want me to join you? We can do this together. And I was like, yes. Like, that's the best piece of advice you could have ever given me. And since that day, he said, hey, let me join you. Let me help you. Let me be a part of it. And we're pretty excited because now I think we just passed maybe last quarter 1 million downloads just with organic growth, with people that are leading organizations and teams around the world. And so, so we have a lot of fun. He's a good guy.
Fantastic. Now, the good news about that, Chris, is that Perry actually told me that story as well.
Good. Did it line up?
It kind of lined up. Perry was more like, you know what? When I read what Chris had said, and I saw the lines, I felt for the John Maxwell Corporation, I had to go in there and go.
Has to. And listen, I know he's listening to this right now, and he's probably laughing wherever he is. But that's probably exactly what he said.
Yeah, that's it. No, it lined up beautifully. Actually, that's very true. Hey, I love that segue. You talked about people valuing people, and it is so simple, and it's almost a throwaway line. But I got to tell you, that is just so true. No matter where you are in the world, leaders, leaders who value people, and so often we don't see that, do we? And then when we do see it, it's sometimes an exception, which is a worry, but it's actually the whole philosophy behind John's work. When I get down to the core of it, that is as leaders valuing people, but also leaders developing leaders. So let's take us back a little bit. So the John Maxwell Company itself, so it focuses on sort of a corporate end of town, would be a fair way of saying that, the sort of the Fortune 500, that type of company.
Yeah, that's it's a great question. We, man, when you talk about change, and I know you probably have a bunch of listeners that deal with change every day. I think all of us deal with change. We're dealing with that right now. And you know a little bit about this and what we're going through. And John has 4 entities, kind of 4 groups. And we're working towards becoming, one team, one dream under one enterprise. And we've been working kind of in silos. And so we're trying to break those walls down, and it's not easy, and things that we're trying to work through. And so with that, I've had the privilege of leading one of those groups, one of the 4. And our main focus is what I would call organizational health. It is helping develop and or enhance, because some do have a culture already, a leadership culture inside organizations around the world, from Fortune 500 companies, as you mentioned, down to small entrepreneur-driven companies. Because at the core, back to your point just a minute ago, at the core of everything that we do as leaders, there are people, and so we have to address that at every size organization. And so I have an incredible team, and that's what we get to focus on every day. And most of the time, I say we're on a plane, in a hotel, or in a boardroom somewhere around the world. That's not going on right now, right? That's not going on right now.
That's so true. Yeah.
But we're doing it. We're still doing it. We're coaching. We're consulting virtually. And one of the differentiators for us, Rob, is that, John really believes it's people first. And there are a lot of, nothing wrong with this. We need systems and we need processes, right? And there are consulting groups that go after that, and we need all that stuff. We start with the people first. We really believe if we can help people understand how to value people, how to believe in people, that will then catapult them into what they need to do when it comes to running a more effective team or business. 100% agree. And that, one of the things I loved about John's work, and it's just so exciting, especially you meet someone who likes John's work and Yes.
reads John's book. And it still amazes me at John. John's written so many books. He's so prolific because he's so intentional. That's why he's prolific. But still amazes me how people in leadership positions, and they say to me, they're leaders, and they say, I haven't heard of John Maxwell. I feel like slapping them around with a 5 Levels book, honestly.
Yes.
Because how much study have you put into that position you're in? And, and one of the things I wanted to talk to you today was about John's 5 levels, which I see as foundational to me, the 5 levels of leadership we're talking about. I said absolutely as a framework. And it's interesting. You talk a little bit about that. A second ago, you said, we focus on people, so, we're less on processes and, frameworks. But then again, I look at what John's built with 5 levels. It's kind of a framework, isn't it, for leadership? Would you be able to describe what the 5 levels is from a John Maxwell Company point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think why this is so important is that it's not uncommon when we go to teams or organizations or even executive leadership teams that have worked together for a long time. And organizations have values, love it, have mission statements, love it, the vision. But we'll sit around the table and we'll say, hey, how do we define leadership here inside this organization? What does leadership mean to you? And Rob, if you and I were in the room leading that conversation and we had 5 other people, they'd probably give us 6 or 7 different answers of what leadership means. And I think the brilliance behind this model and what I love about John, and it's the only reason I've been able to kind of work with him for so long, is his stuff is simple. Otherwise, if it was complicated, I couldn't understand it. Now, it's not simple to apply it. We've got to be disciplined to apply it as leaders. But the 5 levels of leadership gives organizations a framework to define leadership, to help them with communication, to help them with productivity, to help them with developing other leaders. And what does this look like? And so he wrote some 20 years ago in a book called Developing the Leader Within You. The very first chapter, he introduced this model, and he called it the 5 levels of influence. And this is really what it is. It's an influence model. It got so much traction that years later, he wrote an entire book, and the publisher said, well, we love that it's an influence model, but we're going to call it 5 levels of leadership. And Rob, you know the story. If you're writing for a publisher, even though it's your book, they get to decide the title because they got to sell it, right? So just a quick 30,000 foot view, John basically says, hey, at level 1, we have influence to lead people because of the title that we're given. And it's a great place to start. We've all been given a promotion, a new job, an opportunity to lead a volunteer group, your community, whatever it might be. But because you have a certain, hey, she is the leader, the manager, all of a sudden you have influence with people because of your title. And it's a great place to start. One of the things that really kind of breaks my heart is, of all the work that we do, people around the world, I would say 70 to 75% never move beyond leading with their title. And
that's a fantastic stat, isn't it? I was wondering whether you had that, because that's my gut impression was it was around 50 to 60. But and so let's talk about that, because I also think that relates to parenting, isn't it? I reckon that most parents are level 1 until their kids get to become teenagers. and then it's like, hang on a second here.
Yeah, Rob, I don't know about you, but I remember I have a 20 and an 18-year-old. And so I remember when I had my first son, my firstborn is my son, I remember thinking, there are some things that my parents said or did that I'm never going to do as a parent. And one of those was that phrase that we've all probably heard before: you're going to do this because I said so.
Yeah, said so.
Which is pure level 1 title leadership.
Level 1.
And I'm going to tell you, I think it didn't last very long for me. And I found myself saying, as a parent, hey, you're going to do this because I said so. When we translate that into the boardroom, into organization, there's a lot of good things about level 1 leadership, but some of the downfalls are that we're not getting the most out of our people, right? Like if we stay there and it's command and control, and it's because I said so. How many of us have been in an organization under some type of leadership before, where we've worked for a leader like that? And I promise you this, I'm sitting there looking at my watch by about 2:00, and I'm ready to go. And they're just not getting that extra effort out of me. And they're not bringing the best out of me as an individual either. And
yes.
So I am following that leader because I have to. I'm doing the bare minimum I have to keep my job. And that's kind of the basis of that level 1 leadership but we all start there. The problem is, you got
to start there. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
We have to start. There's nothing wrong with starting there too. I think that you have to start there. And so people want to, sometimes I show this to people and they go, I want to be level 5. And I'm like, you got to go through, you can't, it's aspirational. I love it's aspirational for you, but we all got to start on level 1 because there's so much learning. I think John mentions it's probably one of the greatest areas of your learning as a leader is in that level 1. And I think he makes I saw him live and he was speaking and he said, it's a great place to start, but you don't want to end there.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. No, you have to. And the only way is, if the leaders, they're listening right now, the only way to really progress through that is make sure that you are continuing to grow yourself, challenge yourself, not only to grow in your leadership and your skills, your awareness, right? We could talk a lot about leaders and their self-awareness. Not only do our people have lack of self-awareness, but I would challenge leaders to say the longer that we have led and the more comfortable that we get in positions of our leadership, we become more unaware of what it's like to be on the other side of our leadership. Leaders, if you want to ask your team a question, if you really want to ask them a question and they'll tell you the truth, here's what I would challenge you to do. Go into your next team meeting and just say, here's the agenda for today. What's it look like to be on the other side of my leadership? And then just stop talking and get ready to write. Because if they're candid with you and they give you good feedback, they're going to give you a blueprint of how to fix some things really, really quick.
That's a fantastic question. And certainly the leaders, the great leaders that probably you and I work with would be very comfortable asking that question.
That's right.
and are comfortable doing 360s, and they have it as part of their process, and part of their systems is their 360s, and they work with great HR people sometimes who do that in organization development. It's the level one leaders who don't want to hear the answer to that question and see it as a waste of time, even asking that question. And I recall earlier John talked about, it's interesting you say the 5 levels of influence versus leadership, because one of the things I found fascinating is when John started teaching leadership, and he started teaching, just calling it leadership, 25, 30 years ago, and no one was really interested. Like he said, he couldn't get people to come along to his workshops, which is bizarre, until he changed it to, well, let me show you how to influence. Oh, I'll come. And it was exactly the same material, but it was like, oh, but I love when he asked the question, and I still get this, and I wonder if you guys do as well, is that some leaders go, I don't need to go to a leadership, I'm already a leader. But they're level one, and they say, I don't need to go to a leadership program, I'm already a leader. I'm too busy for that. I'm already a leader. Someone else needs to go to that. And they don't. Do you still find there's people like that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, that statement, and those that are listening to us right now that said, I don't need to ask that question in my next team meeting, I would question anybody that had that statement or said, no, I don't need to ask that question. Are they really open to seeing the other side of their leadership? Because we all have natural tendencies. I do, Rob, you do, my team does. And until we get to a point that we understand, our blind spots as leaders and things that other people see that we don't, and we will never be the most effective people leader and developer of people that we can be, unless we're able to have those types of conversation. And what I'm not telling you as a leader is that it has to be collaborative. You have to lead the way they want to lead. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an awareness issue. And even to your point with some of the senior leadership teams, sometimes we'll come in and we partner. It's a process for us. And so we don't like to do kind of just a catalytic event. We like to build a journey and kind of help grow the culture of organizations. And a lot of times we'll come in and leadership teams will be like, man, this sounds awesome. Our people need that. Go ahead and start with them. And I go, no. No. It starts with you, right? Because leadership is a visual sport, and they're going to be watching you. And so we're not going to come in here, because what's going to happen is if they don't see you buying into it and they don't see change in you, they're not going to do it.
That's absolutely so true, isn't it? All the sort of big transformations I've done over the years, and mine have been mainly around the sales and sales leadership, but transformations around go-to-market and I can tell you, it doesn't matter how much money they spend, it doesn't matter how good the office is, how great the coffee they serve is. As soon as the leaders go, yes, well, look, our people will be ready for you. Now, look, do you want me to kick something off or sign something? I got to start all over again and go, no. I love that. It's a visual sport, leadership. So no, you're in this, but then I can tell you other time, and I've just been working with a great organization in Australia that's, from the very first kickoff I did for them pre-Christmas, which was a sales conference they were doing, and I was doing a session there. The founder and leader was in the room. He was in the room. He was asking questions. He was dynamic. He was involved, and he's immersed in his people. And I really mean that. I mean, he sat in his people, not at the front, immersed in them. And you could just tell in the room how much respect they had for him, how connected he was to their world. And, and Chris, as a facilitator, as a leader and who's teaching and running this stuff, I want to work with this company. I want to work with this group, because I know that I can make so much difference to them having this kind of leader. And he was the first to put his hand up and say, can we do my disc report first?
That's
can
awesome.
we get my disc one done and use mine as an example? And you just know when you have that commitment, that's a small thing, isn't it? But it's such a big thing. It's what I call a little big thing. It's a little thing like that just shows so much to the rest of the team. Well, we're all in, and it's a visual sport. I love that.
Hey, it's contagious. Either way,
yes,
it's contagious. That's a classic example of a culture and a leader where then you get participation, you get discretionary effort, you get buy-in, you get innovation, you get creativity. Versus if he were to stand up and say, hey, man, I'm so excited. Rob's here. We're going to do some great things. Y'all have a great day. And he walks out the door, right? Now, do you think the rest of the day you're going to get everything out of those people? No, because it's contagious that way as well. And so when you think about influence and you think about it starting at the top, it goes both ways, leaders. So listen, you have a culture inside your leadership team, inside your organization, whether you like it or not. And so if we're not intentional about designing it the right way, it's going to happen. It's just not going to be the one that you want.
Yeah, that's so true. So let's talk about that those levels. So we've got position where we start off. Well, then we go to level 2. So level 2, we go up to permission.
Yeah, this is where people give you the permission to lead them, right? Where you increase your influence at a place to where John calls this level 2 influence. And he calls it about relationships. People follow you because they want to. And I really believe that this is the foundation of your success as a leader. You understand how to do this really well, influence people really well, and do it with the right motive. We talk a lot about the fact there's a very fine line between influence and manipulation. And we're not talking about manipulation. And that fine line is motive. And so the motive has to be pure, but you have to drive the ability to connect with your people. John talks about it as relationships at level 2. And this is kind of where you build that trust and the discretionary effort and all those things moving forward. This is the foundation. But one of the things that I like to talk about when it comes to this point is, listen, we don't want to or necessarily have to build a relationship with everybody that we work with. Okay. Yeah. We don't necessarily like everybody that we work with. And that's okay. We don't connect with them just naturally. But as a leader, it's our responsibility to figure out how to connect with them. Don't have to build relationships, but we got to figure out how to connect. And we talk about the fact that, understanding your behavioral traits connect, your values connect, adversity connects, projects connects, input, questions connect. And we talk to leaders all the time about these different ways that you can connect with your people in order to gain level 2 influence.
I think that's a wonderful description, Chris, because people think about relationships. I got to build a relationship with this person. I don't really like them. I don't really connect on a personal level, but I love that way we connect on a business level. We connect, through a project. We connect on an initiative. We connect on our feelings about a certain product, for example. There are so many ways that you can connect. You don't need to have that relationship. But oftentimes a relationship comes later, doesn't it? But it doesn't have to come either.
That's right.
But they still can follow you because they want to follow you. And I think that's where we start to get into, I think what I love about the 5 levels, and I've done a lot of competitive sport and team sport, right? So level 1 it was almost, when I read about it, I went, oh, wow, I've never seen that before. Because when you're doing competitive amateur sport, and I'm an amateur. I mean, you don't have to do that. And I've done a lot of yacht racing. I don't have to get on that boat. That crew doesn't have to come with me. I'm not paying them. We're doing it for a whole reasons that we connect. There's a relationship, and we go through that next area of permission. And the next area of level 3 is production. Yeah. Tell me about level 3.
Now, this is where, as leaders, your credibility is really built. Okay. And at level 2, it's great. We got to connect with our people. That's the foundation, but we can't stay there. We talk about this all the time and let me back up. I think I also want your listeners to know that we're all naturally kind of wired, whether it's relational level 2, or you are a production kind of level 3 task-minded individual. We need each other, but we're all naturally bent that way. And by the way, so is your team. So understand that about them. But level 3 is where you gain influence because of what you've been doing for that team and for the organization, maybe in and through the team. And we talk a lot about the fact that when you think back and you talk about sports, I love connecting sports, with leadership. There's so much there for us. But I often say, hey, we've all been a part of winning teams, and we've all been a part of losing teams. And I promise you, we all want to jump in the boat, to your illustration, a lot faster with a winning team and follow that captain versus one that's losing. And so my encouragement to you leaders is that you have to understand, remember I told you it's a visual sport. You're going to connect with them, but then they're going to be watching you and they're going to be like, hey, are we hitting our KPIs? Are we exceeding our quota? Hey, are we getting mentions from the CEO to some innovation, some ideas, and all these different things? And when that starts to happen, people are going to go, man, I want to be a part of Rob's team because not only does he connect with me, but man, we are winning. Like we are killing it. And I'm learning how to produce as an employee, as a team member, following Rob and his leadership at level 3. When that happens, Rob, then people will give you level 3 influence.
I think that level 3 is fantastic. And I certainly, when you were in level 2, but you were, we weren't winning that much. You wanted to know who are the teams that were winning. And then your next step up is how can I get better? And, I think this is from a young age. I could be wrong here, Chris, but a really good friend of mine, he's actually a CPA, and he was telling me the story. He coaches like junior football, right? And he was coaching junior football. And I said, how'd you go on the weekend? He goes, well, he said, it was great. We had a great win. He said, but it was tough. It was really tough. I said, what? For you? He said, no, for me. He said, I had all these parents at halftime. He said, we're up like by 3 goals. And I had all these parents come to me and go, why aren't you playing my son? Why aren't you playing my daughter? Why aren't you playing? You're not giving them enough time. And I was just getting hassled from the parents. And the kids were fantastic, hassled from the parents. And so I said, you know what? It's kind of the kids' game. Let's all go. So he got all the parents. He said, let's go and have a chat to the kids about this. So he went over to the group of kids, right? And not all of them were getting a lot of time because it was a grand final, right? And he says, okay, kids, who wants to win this today? My kids' hands shot up, right? They're like 8 years old. Yeah. We're going to win today. He goes, right. Okay. So to win today, what we're going to have to do, we're going to have to play Sally and Billy and Jake a little more often than some of you. Some of you okay? Just have a little bit of bench time for this last quarter, but we'll probably win it. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah, man. Get Jake on there. Get Billy on. Some of the kids going, I suck. I can't run today. So he turns around. And the kids are like totally into it, right? And he turns to the parents. He goes, well, I don't know. Do you guys want to have a chat to them now? Right?
That is awesome.
Oh, we're good.
That is brilliant.
And they just went back and I think that that's production because those kids, even the kids who weren't up to it, were like, yeah, but we want to win. We want to be part of this group that's winning, and we know that we're pretty good here, but this is the big leagues. We know that Jake and Sally are a little better than we are, but we want to be part. We're happy to do like 5 minutes, come back to the bench, but we want to be part of production. And it was such a great little example, and that's what he was talking about.
That is brilliant example. I love that. You may hear me use that. I will give you credit for it. But what's interesting about that, and I'm thinking about that illustration, those individuals that maybe didn't see as much playing time, let's say the next year goes by, right? And they're like, hey, whose team would you rather be on? And it's a current coach or the one you had last year. And they're going to remember contributing a small part, but they're going to remember being a part of that culture and a part of that team and a part of the fact that, maybe a couple did play more. And it's the leader's responsibility to be able, to do that. But if you're not winning, if you're not producing, whatever your KPIs are inside your organization, whatever they are, you should know what they are. And if you're not hitting them, then you better figure out how, because you may be losing some influence with your people because they want to be a part of a winning team. But that is a fantastic example.
Yeah, and I had another leader I was talking to the other day, and he called me up and it's a potential client, and he said, yeah, I think we got a leadership problem in this particular state. And I was interested, and I said, so how do you know that? And it's during COVID, so he hasn't been able to travel as much as he would. He's a very hands-on leader. And he said, we're just not attracting good leaders. He said, to me, that's the first sign that I've got a leadership problem at the moment. We're not attracting great people and great leaders and great contributors. And I thought that was a really good point. And again, I think back to, organizations that I've worked for, and even cruise and yachts I've sailed on. I kind of wanted to get on a boat or wanted to sail with a certain person because I admired what they did, kind of level 3, because they were 1, 2, and then I went to 3. I wanted to get there. And so you find that, and I imagine that's true with you as well. You would find that great leaders attract new leaders and great people as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You and I were talking at level one influence with leaders, and I know you're familiar with John teaching, the law of the lid principle, right?
Yeah.
Where, hey, the outcome of your team is really going to be all driven around where your ability to lead that team is. And so are you continuing to grow yourself? And what he says, and I think this is so true, which is, hey, we attract who we are, not who we want. Okay.
That's a
So
great line.
think about that for just a minute. Let's say that as a leader, you're humble and you say, yeah, I'm a marginal leader. You get an open rec where you can hire somebody to join your team, and you're like, man, we're going to improve this team. I'm going after a rock star, and I'm going after somebody that's a 7 or an 8, and we're going to get things done. Well, I tell people all the time, and I tell leaders, and I'm like, if you sell them to join your team, and you would have to sell them, once they get there and they realize, right, that you're not alike, right, and then all of a sudden they're going to bail. And so you have got to, as a leader, remember exactly what you said. You got to be thinking about, how am I developing myself, and how am I attracting other leaders like I want? And the only way to really do that is to be that yourself as a leader.
Yeah, that's right. And that's how many times have you seen that? And it's very expensive.
Oh.
No one wins out of that. Customers lose, teams lose, leaders lose. It's such a great point when you see those, those leaders who are maybe, trying to attract that kind of rock star or a team of rock stars, and it just doesn't work. I see that in professional services. I see that actually quite a bit. They try and bring a really good team into one organization, even a team of 3 or 4. Because sometimes in professional services, it might be a lawyer, an accountant, or an insolvency expert. He says, I don't go unless my posse come. It's a bit like a band, and they bring that 3 or 4 in, and the 3 or 4 get there and go, what have we been sold into? This is not, and then that's just a disaster, because it doesn't live up, is it? It's not it's not the quality that you expected. So from there we go to level 4, which is people development.
Yeah.
This
is really, I think, John just released a book that is kind of, what people call the leader's greatest return, or an ROI on leadership. And so, I think people initially are like, oh, let me see what the financial return is. How are we going to be a better leader to have a better EBITDA at the bottom of our financials? And they start going through the book, and they realize very quickly that's not what he's talking about. And what he's saying is the leader's greatest return is when we have the ability and do a really good job of developing other people and watching them succeed. I mean, I know that all the people you've worked with and you've poured into and you've coached these, and then all of a sudden you see them flourish. There's no better feeling than a leader to see that. And so at level 4, John says, hey, you gain influence with people when you begin developing other people. And at this, he calls it the people development level, and people follow you because of what you have done and what you are doing for them. And we like to say personally and professionally. And so when you look at a team member, I want you to look at them as a complete, person, because I promise you this, we spend more time with people that we work with than that we live with, right? And so I want the best person, not only at home, but also inside the office. And I bet a lot of our listeners would agree, what's going on at home, they bring to work with them, right? So we say, we have this thing at the John Maxwell Company where we sit down with each one of our team members, and we talk about, hey, what are your, one-on-one with their leader? What are your personal goals? What are your professional goals? And we go, what are your financial goals? Like, let us take this journey with you. Like, and we get pushback sometimes on this, because people are like, hey, why would you invest time in, developing people personally and professionally? And what if they don't want to be at the John Maxwell Company in 4 or 5 years? And so we're like, that's okay. And they look at me like, what? And I'm like, yeah, because the alternative is a whole lot worse. I don't add value. I don't develop them, and they stay. And so one of the things that really bothers us, and we're seeing this a ton in organizational development, is we talked just a minute ago, Rob, about the law of the lid with an individual. In organizations, we see the lid right above level 3. People understand you get a title. They understand you got to connect to lead people. They understand you got to produce. We understand those 3 things. But then there's just a lid that people don't want to share. They don't want to develop other people. They don't want to allow them to have some of the, some of the glamour, some of the rewards and all that stuff. And what ends up happening is we get more calls about succession planning and sustainability of their culture. And we get in there and we start looking around, and we have too many leaders that are just playing everything close to their chest and are not worried about growing their influence to develop other people.
Yeah, that's so very true. I had a really good example, Chris, of this with a law firm, in a very prestigious, globally aligned law firm. And the first thing the leaders were saying to me was, these damn millennials.
Yeah.
We invest in them, we train them, and then all they want to do, they're gone to work in a rock star office in London, and the older partners, they were livid over this. And then the organizational director in HR came up with this fantastic idea, which nearly cost her job. And she said, we should make everyone who leaves our organization alumni. And the partners were just ballistic, because alumni was really only if you're a partner, you'd retired, right? It was just this, They've always been that way, and they had a great group, and they had a lot of perks, and it was a wonderful thing. It was aspirational to achieve it. And I could get where they were coming from. Right. And she said, no. She said, we're going to, and she fought hard. It took 12, 18 months. It's not a short time to get this instituted. And what they did was they ended up saying to everybody, that when you left their organization, you became part of their alumni. And they got it through, because here's what they worked out. They went, you know what? The millennials were going to leave anyway, right? They're coming in, they got trained up, they were passionate about while they were there, but they kind of had goals and aspirations. So they spent time learning about, not all of them were doing this, but they spent time, to your point, learning, what did you want to do? Where did you want to go? What were your goals over the next 4 or 5 years? And once they found that out, of course, they found out, they said, well, I'd love to work in London or the New York office, or I'd love to work here. And they would, fantastic. Can we help you with that? So they would work with their partner firms in the US or in the UK. That's or brilliant. In Europe to place these people, right? Because that's brilliant. But there was an ROI behind it though, Chris. You know what the ROI was? They found out was that 90% of the alumni that left and went and did this wanted to come back to Australia when they wanted to have kids and see family. And it was literally, the numbers showed it. And they said, well, if we send them off and with a terrible feeling and we don't like them anymore and well, thanks for nothing, they'll go away. They'll come back, but they won't want to work for us. And they said, wouldn't it be better to actually know what they want to do? We place them in the firms that are going to spend the most amount of training on them. So when they come back to us, we don't have to do it. And they joined. Awesome. That's what they did. And that's what they did. And to me, that was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that was really level 4. I thought that was a really level 4 way of doing, because they then built this great group of aligned, talented people that came back and were passionate and actually thankful and said, thank you for placing me in London or wherever it was I went to. I'm equipped and I'm now an international lawyer. So it was credit, and off you go from there. But as I said, call credit to her for 18 months of hanging in there on what was an outstanding, and frankly, it was the other thing, Chris, was it was a differentiator because none of their competitor firms did it. And they got known through the graduation programs so they started attracting all the things we talked about. They started attracting the best raw talent because people knew there was a chance of doing that.
They almost innovated into a placement service, right?
They almost did. Yeah.
But that's brilliant. That is phenomenal. It wasn't
the intention, but it kind of worked out pretty well. And I think when you get to level 4, and I love level 4, and I'm sure you've developed leaders as I have it. And you're exactly right, Chris. There's nothing like, and I had one the other day. I posted an old photo on LinkedIn of some stuff I did, early 2000s, and some of the team that were with my team back then. I used to do some pretty crazy stuff, but a very quick story. When I was at I was at Hewlett Packard for a number of years, and Hewlett Packard back then had a view of that. They didn't have to give you any advertising and marketing dollars because they were HP, and when they build it, people will come. Well, I had news for them. They were competitors, and I actually needed to advertise and market. So I did a lot of stuff with TV programs and movies and product placement, to get my stuff on TV without paying for it. Was the long story short, but it was a fun time. And I posted a photo from back then, and a couple of the people who worked for me back then wrote, "Oh, great times! I remember these times. I remember being on this, and so good now." And we learned so. And a couple of them said, we learned so much from you during that time. And I went, you know what? I am loving seeing you guys in such high positions, in an IBM, in a Microsoft, and in some great corporations. They're leading teams. They're great leaders. And I said, that for me is the exciting part, to see you guys have gone on and done what you've done, not only in their professional lives, but their personal lives. And I think that's level 4 for me, is seeing those leaders, become leaders, leaders creating more leaders.
That's it. Leaders developing leaders. Love it.
So we go from 4 that, he said, one more. Yes, there's number 5, which is pinnacle. It's the top. How often do you see level 5?
Yeah, I think all of us have level 5 leaders in our life. If I were to ask you a question, who's the greatest leader that you've ever worked for, you've served with, you volunteered with, maybe it's in your family? That individual that comes to mind right now, they're a level 5 leader for you. They have level 5 influence in your life. Now, there are world-known level 5 leaders, right? But I don't want to make it so big people go, oh, that's something that I can't achieve, because there are people in your life that if you look back, and it's kind of Rob and I talked about going through each one of these levels, and that leader that you just thought about, if you think about it, it started with a title. Somehow or another, you gave them permission to lead you. Then you guys won together some way, and then they developed you. And then over time, John says at this pinnacle level that they've just led you so well for so long that if you were in a meeting and they were to text you or call you and say, I need to talk right now, you would step out of that meeting, and we would want you to step out of that meeting because of what they have invested in your life. And so at that level, here's what I want everybody to understand. When you think about this model, remember, level 1 and level 5 are given to you. Level 1 is given to you by the organization. You got a title, you got a promotion, you got an opportunity to lead a volunteer group, community. Level 5 is given to you by the people that you've led over time. So 1 and 5 are given to you. All of the work has to be done at levels 2, 3, and 4. That's where you have to grind. That's where you have to do the work. The other thing I'll say too about this is people get to determine what level of influence you have with them. You don't get to determine what level of influence with. So I can't come up to Rob and say, man, Rob, I'm so excited. You're on my team. I'm a level 5 leader. We're going to kill it together, right? Rob's going to look at me like I'm an idiot because Rob just started last week. And so I'm on level 1 with Rob. I'm not at level 5. And so the people get to tell you what level you're at. So just remember that yes, you can achieve level 5. There are level 5 leaders in your life, and just know that it's given to you, but it's given to you by the people that you've led over time.
I love that you've it's given to you at level 1, given to you at level 5. I really like that. But also like the other last point you made, Chris, which is that because even if we're a level 5 leader or a level 4 leader, we don't just have level 4, level 5 conversations with everybody. We go level 1 conversation with some people, level 2, level 3, level 4, depending on our relationship with them. And there's a whole bunch of reasons. That's why I love this as a framework. It's such an interesting framework, which people would say, in an area called leadership, people would go, oh, isn't that kind of like a black art or it's a dark world? Well, it's actually not. And again, leadership is a skill we can learn. And this helps, isn't it? I think it really helps those organizations looking for something like that.
Yeah, we introduced it today, just as kind of this stair-step process. To your point, it is much more complex than that. And I know that you know this to be true. Probably the number one competency that's requested to improve an organization, especially in times like now, is communication, right? But one of the great things about this tool is as you begin to put metrics in place and measure your leaders on these different levels, you also have a communication model that allows you to work faster, work more efficient without hurting people's feelings. People kind of know what your intent behind the conversation is. You don't have to worry about the water cooler talk because they're like, man, came into Chris's office today and he went straight to go mode. He must be in a bad mood. Versus if you came into my office, I've been like, hey, Rob, I got to go level 3 on you really quick today. I got some deadlines. Soon as I say level 3, if that is a common language throughout your organization, I immediately have cut to the chase and they know what my intent is. And we don't have to worry about them thinking, man, Chris is in a bad mood, or Chris doesn't like me, or he's out to get me. And so you begin to think about the pace of which organizations are working in today. You have got to have a common language of how you communicate, how you connect, and how you lead each other.
I totally agree with you. I like common language because it just cuts out subjectivity. It cuts to the quick of what's got to happen. And sometimes you need in areas where we need strong communication and certainly, through elite sport I've done, that is so important because you've got such critical times that you don't have time for explanations. You've got to have that playbook or that common language to be able to move. When I think about the 5 levels, one of the areas I'm really interested in is it would work so well the earlier you get in, Chris. Would that be right? So do you do much work with startups or new organizations maybe with Gen Zs and millennials these days? What are their sort of feelings towards it? And does it work really well the earlier you can get into an organization in its growth?
Yeah, I think the earlier you can get in, with any type of system or process or model, the easier it is to adapt it to kind of what they're doing, especially, with the startups, and you think about the leader and you have that growth mindset, and that leader is willing to learn. And so it is easier at that level, but it's also, we've seen it work tremendously well in older organizations when the leadership team has bought in, or when the head of a certain division or unit has bought in. One of the things that we saw, you talked about the younger generation of workers coming up and coming through. One of the things that's been really eye-opening to us, it goes back to that fantastic illustration you gave about that organization, helping them find the next place for them to go. When you think about this model, and you think about the younger generation, they are more about connecting, and they are more about purpose, and they are more about development. And so many of us, as leaders in previous years, we go straight from level 1 to level 3. We automatically have to start producing, and we don't really care about the other stuff. We need to know what our KPIs are. And we run over level 2. And if you do it the right way, the younger generation so greatly appreciates you taking time to understand their perspective, understand and ask them questions and get their input. And when you do it the right way, you will get their buy-in. And then that example you gave level 4 is so good. But we tell people will join your organization and your team for one reason, but they won't stay for that same reason. So what are you doing to continually add value to those team members? And that's so important more than ever with the younger generation, because, with our generation, there's loyalty and we're just going to stay with the brand and we're going to grind it out until we retire. That is not the case. And so as leaders, we ought to be thinking about, how am I growing my level of influence with them? And more importantly, what am I continually doing to add value to them, to develop them? And to your point earlier, I saw a statistic the other day where they were talking about the younger generation. And it was funny because the number one reason that they were choosing careers or choosing jobs, number 2 was compensation. Number 1 was, what is my career and development path, and how are they going to add value to me? Now, that may seem a little selfish on the outskirt, but that's not the intent behind it. They want that. They just have that furious desire and hunger, to grow.
In Australia, it's actually worse, Chris. It's the stats we've got over here is something like 40% of Gen Zs regret their decision to where they've gone. And the top three things from employees was, I think compensation was 3rd or 4th now. The first one was like leadership competency. So the competency of my manager or leader. The second one was around autonomy. And I think the third one was work-life balance. This is pre-COVID, mind you. And then fourth was compensation. But what was interesting was that, there was a couple of surveys. This is cross generations, by the way. It was like just the leadership capability, the competence of my management team, and work-life balance outweighed compensation. Hands down. In the last, and you just go, we've got this gap. This sort of leadership vacuum, people call it. But and it's leadership and management. Those two, you got to have both. One, but I do think that's a really interesting point. I do think that certainly the younger generation, I'm very hopeful. I'm very excited. I love working with millennials. I know John does. He always talks about it, but I love
loves it.
Gen Z. And there's a big difference between the two. You've got the kids of your age are Gen Z, the same as mine, and they are different than millennials in a good way too. I think in a good way, but even more so the relationship side, the connected part, and it's almost, I find with the Gen Zs that if you haven't got the level 2, the relationship, right? They don't give you permission to go to 3. Like they don't give you permission to get to 3, and it's connectedness as relationship, like we talked about. But once you've got that, well, it's full steam ahead to level 3. Then 4 becomes just so much easier to do. I really like that. What are you seeing during COVID? Well, just last kind of question, Chris, in COVID. What are some of the good leadership you've seen during COVID?
Well, as John has taught us, no one writes a playbook for leadership, and certainly no one has written a playbook for how to lead during kind of the times that we're in now. A couple of things that I've seen that, I've heard that I think are really important, have stuck with me over the last 4 or 5 months as leaders that I would kind of leave you with is, I think we all lead with uncertainty, right? We don't have all the answers. And so what we have to do though, is we have to communicate with clarity. And so what I would challenge the leaders, and what I've seen leaders do that really, really well, and our CEO, Mark Cole, has spent some time talking about this, where he's very clear, even though we're in uncertain times. This is where we're going. This is what we want to do. This is what our values are. This is how we're going to do it. Don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know. And that's hard for some people, right? Because you have to understand everybody communicates either in the how language or the why language, right? And so you're going to lose some of your crowd, and you got to figure out how to communicate that. But I think as leaders, we have to be extremely clear. The other thing that I've seen where people have done really, really well, and this kind of comes around the communication piece with leading teams, is that it is so important for them, and they want to hear your voice more than they care about the words that you're saying in the moment. So when you're in uncertain times as leaders, they want to hear you. You may go, I have no idea what to say to them. I have no idea what to say.
That's right. Just
get on there and say that. Say, I have no idea what to say, but let me tell you about how I'm dealing with it personally. I think prior to this COVID, I think we had almost kind of a line between our personal lives and our professional lives. And I think that's no longer going to be the case. I think those lines are blurred, and we may never go back. And so as you think about this, I've heard a lot about leadership fatigue, right? So continue to pour in and develop yourself, but don't get so fatigued because you don't know the words to say or the direction to your team. Just let them hear your voice and just be very clear in uncertain times.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, Chris. And I've one of the things I've been telling people is that, don't get confused between visibility and vision. They need your visibility. They don't necessarily need your vision, but they do need your authenticity. And I think I have seen a lot of, too many for my liking, leaders still sanitizing their communication through corporate affairs. And I'm like, this is not the time to do this. John makes a great point about being judicious with your communication. In other words, don't overdo it but do your research and get it right. Yeah. But I think being authentic, being in the moment, going, you know what, we haven't seen this before. This is what we know now. This is what we're doing, but I'm needing your feedback. The whole kind of listen, learn, lead, the 3 L's.
That's right.
which I love, is it's just that's the thing to do. I really like that. Hey, on that, so you got a couple of things coming up. So where do people get hold of your podcast? So the one you do with Perry, what's the best access point for that one that you do with Perry?
Yeah, if you'll visit johnmaxwellcompany.com, on there you'll see a podcast link, and that's where we put up different blogs and the transcripts of the podcast, and then even the podcast, and that'll lead you there how to subscribe to it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And now we've got something timely coming up. You and I were talking off air. You're rehearsing for a webinar. When is that on, the webinar? And that's around leadership really during times of COVID, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, and so this is Perry and I. So in addition to our podcast, one of the things that we want to help leaders do with their team is just make sure that the culture of their team and the connectedness and how do you lead teams through this? And, because really, when you talk about what we're going through, we're really talking about a retention of your team members during a time like how do you lead them in a way that you can retain them and keep them engaged in uncertain times? And so we're going to be doing once a month over the next couple of months around how to accelerating teamwork. And we're going to do kind of an hour webinar once a month on LinkedIn. And so on the 25th of August, so for us, that'd be tomorrow with our recording here today. It'll be tomorrow from 12 to 1 o'clock Eastern time. But also, though, if you would visit the John Maxwell Company, LinkedIn page, it'll still be up there. And so if you missed the live stream, it'll be on there. And so our goal is each month is to add some value to those that are leading teams and to help them with the culture of what they're trying to create.
Fantastic. Now, that's a couple of great resources, and obviously you got those for the LinkedIn page when it gets up there, which will be awesome. And great work, Chris. You and Perry putting this out because it's needed. And as you said, this isn't going away soon. It's not as though we've got a vaccination around the corner that many of our leaders would have us believe, but I think that's a while to go. And I don't think we're going back to the times we had. I think this is a new normal. It's a new normal for all of us. What even that means, I don't even know yet. And we're just about to have the John Maxwell team with John running his IMC coming up as well, virtually again, but I know it'll be pretty exciting. But that's been a massive shift from the conference we used to go to in Florida. So all of us are going through this change. And the thing I like about leadership especially is that no one has all the answers. And so it's a continual, right. You're always contributing, you're always learning. And it's one of the things I like about yourself and I like about what John does and Mark Cole is that they're always reaching out to other leaders, whether it be a Simon Sinek or a Carly Fiorina, they're always going, how can those people add value to you or Mark or myself or even to John? I'd love that approach is an abundance mindset, which is a great thing to have. Hey, it's been fantastic having you on, Chris. I've really been excited. It's been a ripper podcast. We're right on time. And so look forward to catching up next time. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Rob. Really enjoyed being with you today.
Hey, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and rate the podcast you listen to so we can continue to serve and inspire others. Remember, connect to us on all the social media channels. The Art of the Possible podcast is hosted by me, Rob Hartnett, and produced by Finn Hartnett. Connect with us directly on LinkedIn, Rob-Hartnett, Hartnett, and Finn Hartnett.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.